Hello and welcome to another pattern recognition video. And today I'm going to do something different. I can't believe that I have never done a video that actually explains what is chess pattern recognition. I had a viewer that said they didn't quite get pattern recognition. They thought that, or they had heard that you should just do the hardest problems, or try to do difficult problems and just keep calculating and calculating till you get the answer or as close to the answer as you can. Well, pattern recognition, basically, it also depends on your level. If you're a chess beginner, you want to start with easier puzzles. Now, for pattern recognition, it's basically where you just do a series of puzzles over and over again until you start to recognize patterns. In chess, there's all kinds of patterns: tactical patterns, strategic patterns, opening patterns. So you can really work on anything. The easiest thing to do is just pick a set of problems, chess puzzles, and generally you want to start off easy. Like checkmates in one, especially if you're a beginner. You could do, easy fork problems, pin problems, and I'll do a couple puzzles while I'm talking here, and you can check those out. I started with 500 to 1,000 rated puzzles, and so that's probably what you want to do when you're trying to figure out chess pattern recognition. Chess pattern recognition is like a method where you can almost take a shortcut in chess. You basically start to learn and memorize these patterns just by solving puzzles regularly, and then you'll notice them more in your games, and it kind of helps you to not calculate as much. If you see a back rank mate in 2 moves, if you were completely unfamiliar with a back rank mate, you might not even look for that or not even notice it. But as you do back rank mate puzzles more often, you'll notice those back rank mates more. And back rank mates is just an example. That goes with anything. Anything you want to work on. If you make a bad move in a game, you just completely overlook a tactic, you could try and find tactical problems or make them up yourself, including the problem that you missed or the move that you missed in the game. And you just do a series of puzzles to help you memorize and more easily see that tactic in the future in your own games. So here we have 500 to 1,000 rated problem. It was White's turn, and they were under a check by this rook, and the king moves away. So here, what would you do? Now, as you're trying to figure out the answer to this puzzle, if you haven't already, I'll talk more about chess pattern recognition. So what is it? Basically, you're going to solve a series of puzzles, and you want to do, go over those puzzles more than once, because if you just do a puzzle once and then forget about it, you're less likely to remember that in future games, and you might just completely forget that tactic. So pick 5 or 10 or 20 or 100 or more puzzles and just go through them nice and slow the first time, and then go through them again and try and do them in half the time. And go through them again, and each time try to do them faster. And the idea is that if you go through that set of puzzles 7 times, by the 7th time you will have memorized and moved a lot of those tactics into your long-term memory, and you'll be able to solve them some instantly because you'll remember the problem. And it'll just help you in your own chess games to better remember tactics or whatever else you're trying to study. That could go with opening patterns as well if you're trying to learn a specific opening. So let's see. Oh, and as far as picking easy or hard problems? It depends what your goal is. If you're trying to work on your calculation ability, well, then you want harder problems, of course, where you have to do a lot more calculating and thinking. But if you're trying to work on the basics of chess, then you just want to go ahead and just pick checkmates in 1 or 2, pick simple tactics like pins, forks, skewers, discovered attacks. So you're picking easier problems that you have to think a little bit maybe, but not too hard, and then you just get a larger volume of problems that you can work through. So you're memorizing a bigger volume of patterns. Now, as you improve and your chess rating gets higher, well then you can do more difficult problems and they'll be easier for you. And you may be able to work on multiple patterns in one problem. Maybe a puzzle will have a fork and a skewer in it, or a pin and a checkmate, so experiment with it and see what works for you as your chess rating level goes up. All right, in this problem, what did you figure out? Well, it looks like generally when you're solving puzzles, you want to start with checks, captures, and threats in that order. So we're looking at the checks first. How can we check? We could bring our rook over to the corner, but it would just be captured. And the only other way is to what? Bring this pawn forward, delivering a check. Well, once you check, or before you check, you want to make sure there's a good follow-up. So what can be done here? Well, if the king moves forward, the rook would deliver a mate. So probably this pawn would capture, and then that would allow our queen to deliver a check up here, forcing the king forward, and then our queen could deliver the mate in the corner here. So let's take a look at that. Check, check, and mate, because the queen's attacking the king. And when a king is in check, there are 3 options: capture the attacker, block the attacker, or run. And if none of those are possible, then it's a checkmate. So there's no way to capture, no way to block, and the king cannot run because of this pawn here. All right, well, let's move on to another problem. And talking more about what is chess pattern recognition. Well, you should just regularly solve puzzles, but solve a group of puzzles, do them more than once, and you may want to revisit those puzzles in the future, because say you go through them 7 times and you can almost instantly solve every puzzle. Well, maybe a month from now, if you try those puzzles again, you won't remember as much. So you may want to revisit puzzles that you've solved previously, go back to those and refresh those tactics and those patterns in your memory in the future. All right, here we were under check. The king is moved. What do we do now? All right. Well, we're looking for checks, captures, and threats. Checks first. We have multiple possibilities. Our queen could deliver a check here, 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 here. But the king would capture on 3 of those squares, and the other one, the king would be able to move into the corner. But then do we have a good follow-up? And what is another check possibility? Well, we have this rook back here as well. So, maybe that is, or obviously that's a better move. Now, these problems are easier, rated rated 500 to 1000. Maybe after we do a few of these, I'll bump it up to 1000 to 1500, just to show you the difference, where if you pick harder problems, you're going to have to deal with more calculation, which might be fine as you improve and become a advanced beginner or an intermediate player and higher. You'll need more difficult problems, and you can still use those to work on calculation and pattern recognition at the same time. But if you're a beginner, I recommend doing easy problems and then slowly working your way up to more difficult problems. So here, why not just deliver a check with this rook, and the king can go nowhere. It can't capture this attacker. It can't run because the queen is covering here and here. So the only thing to do is block, but then the blocking queen will be captured. So, pause the video at any time if you want to take a closer look at that. But if not, here we go. Check and mate here. All right. I'll do 3 more of these real quick just to get some puzzles in for you. Let's see, what do we have here? And then I'll try, after we do these 3 more, I'll bump it up to more difficult problems just to show you the difference where there'll be more calculation. All right. In any problem or before any move on the board, look at checks, captures, and threats. And also, I had the same viewer who said they didn't understand pattern recognition. They asked what my rating was. Well, on chess.com, I'm around a 1750 rapid rating. My blitz and bullet is much worse because, I'm getting older. I've probably played chess for over 40 years, and I'm past my prime. But I do have a lot of knowledge. I have a large library of books that I've read over the years, and that helps. But I've never had a chess teacher. I never took lessons from any chess teacher or chess master, which probably could have helped improve my chess. I played in some tournaments, but not enough. So now, as I'm doing this YouTube channel, at the same time, I'm trying to see if I can raise my chess rating. I have a quest for 2000 rapid rating on chess.com video. I do a video series called the Quest for 2000. You can check that out. So, I'm trying to improve, before I get too old, I guess. So anyway, why would you want to watch my videos or learn from me? Well, I think I could teach beginners well. If you become an advanced beginner, I think I can still offer those players something as well. But as you become an intermediate and higher level player, of course, you may want a higher rated teacher, a 2000 or even a 2200 chess master. But just remember, as your teacher has a higher rating, if you got lessons from a grandmaster, sometimes you have to check to see, they may be a great chess player, but you have to check to see how they are with teaching. Because just because somebody is a chess master doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a great chess teacher. Because sometimes they will grasp things, so easily because they're at such a higher level than a beginner, let's say, that beginner might have trouble following what they're teaching, unless that chess master makes sure they slow it way down and just make sure the beginner is grasping what they're teaching. All right, so here, what do we have? Black moved queen to g2. Does that do anything? It defended the knight here. So it's white's turn, and hopefully you solve this problem. Look for checks first, and you'll see a mate in 1. And we just want to make sure if we go here that there's nothing they can do. They can't capture because the bishop is backing up the queen. They can't block when the pieces will be side by side, and the king can't run anywhere. All right, we can't be captured. All right, so there you go. You have an easy mate in 1. That was rated 570. So this is stuff that would be good for a beginner. Just do a bunch of puzzles with the basics. So I'll do 2 more of these easy puzzles, and then we'll do some that are a little more difficult just to show the difference. All right, so what do we have here? The knight's jumped forward, putting pressure on the bishop, the knight, but it's our turn. So what do we want to do here? Now, these are random puzzles, and that's something you may have to figure out when you're trying to decide, what type of pattern recognition should you work on, what type of puzzles should you use. Well, you have options. You can do totally random puzzles, start easy and work your way up to more difficult ones. Or if you have a particular problem or area of chess that you want to work on more, like let's say you have trouble with forks or pins or discovered attacks, you can focus on one of those by doing a set of puzzles that only deal with that specific area. And once again, I recommend starting easy and working your way up. If you want to work on just the basics, stick with easier problems. If you want to work on calculation, then you can go to harder problems, and it's less pattern recognition, or a little bit of both, where you get some calculation practice in and pattern recognition. All right. What happened? That knight is attacking. Now, there's also a threat of going here, forking the queen and the rook. So what options do we have? Do we have any checks, captures, or threats? Well, checks, captures, or threats. I have to remember that these are 500 to 1,000, so the answer is probably not overly complicated. The obvious move would be to just take this knight, because we don't have any good checks. So if we take that knight, we have a discovered attack on this bishop as well. And so if the queen takes the knight, takes our knight here, then we take their bishop here. But let's say we take the knight. If the bishop that's under attack and not protected tries to take, well, then our knight can drop back and capture. So that looks like a good move. All right, and we just grab that. And we come out ahead in material there with the extra knight. All right, I'll do one more of these, and then I'll bump up the difficulty a little bit. So what do we have here? Queen up to d4. Oh, and talking about a chess teacher, and if you ask what somebody's rating is to determine if they should, if you should listen to them or, hire them as a teacher if you're looking to pay somebody, don't always just look at the rating. Yes, that can make a difference. You want somebody, a little bit higher rated than you if you're just playing against somebody for practice. But if you have, if you want a teacher, you probably want, somebody who's at least a few hundred or 500 or more rating points above you, but, maybe not too far above your level. Once again, I mentioned if a chess master is teaching a beginner, he will have to teach them in a different way than he would, an intermediate or advanced player, of course. So you just have to make sure whoever you have teaching you chess, whether it's somebody on a YouTube video or you hire a teacher, just make sure they're a good fit for you. If you need somebody to go over the material slower, make sure you don't find somebody that's just blasting through everything too fast for you. Just find a chess instructor that seems to be a good fit for you. All right, in this problem, the queen is centralized here, attacking our unprotected rook, but it is our turn. All right, this is a good back rank mate pattern. And as I mentioned, with back rank mate patterns, if a beginner had never seen that pattern, then he could use pattern recognition by getting a series of back rank mate puzzles together, maybe 10, 20, 50, 100, and just start going through those. Go through them nice and slow the first time, then try and go through them faster each time. And, go through them about 5, 6, 7 times is generally a figure that can be used to help put those tactics from your short-term memory into your long-term memory, and then review those puzzles maybe a couple weeks later, a month later, and see what you remember. And you'll probably remember a lot more, and you'll learn a lot more than if you just do a puzzle once and forget about it. So here we have a back rank mate threat and checkmate. So what you would do is move this queen over here, delivering a check to the king, and the king has to run into the corner, and then you can sacrifice your queen, and by moving it here, the rook would capture, and then your rook would deliver the mate. So for any beginners out there, take a look at that and solve it in your head. And now if you're ready, here we go. Check, and then the mate on the back rank. So, problems like that, if you do a whole bunch of those, that would help you work on the basics of back rank mates. And as you improve, you'll need more difficult back rank mates or any other problem. Maybe a back rank mate that takes 3 or 4 moves or 5 moves to accomplish and involves more calculation. All right, but if you're just working on basics and trying to recognize more patterns, that way you'll see those patterns more in your games. Start with basic, easy problems, and then you can always work your way up. All right, we did 5 of those, so I'm going to go to the puzzle section here and just bump the rating up from 500 to 1,000 to 1,000 to 1,500, just to show you the difference, how the problems will be a little more complicated. So here we go. And there'll probably be a little bit more calculation involved. Black is just what? Maybe captured a pawn here or captured something. And I think it was a pawn. It's our turn. What would you do here? Okay. Well, in any given position, a good rule of thumb is to look for checks, captures, and threats. Before you move, after your opponent moves, that'll help you figure out what you should do. And then think, once you make your move, what will your opponent do? Will they have checks, captures, or threats that they can use against you? So it's important to look at both sides of the board for those checks, captures, and threats. All right, here, what checks do we have? Well, the obvious move is this queen capturing the f-pawn, delivering a check. Is there any other possible checks? None that I see. So that looks to be a good starting point. We capture the f-pawn, chase the king, and this is where we have to do a little bit of calculation. So once we capture that king, the only thing he can do is run here. But then what do we do? How do we follow it up? Our queen, pause the video if you'd like to calculate this out more before I give away the answer. But once that king runs over to d8, we can't go ahead and deliver the mate here by capturing this bishop because the knight is guarding that. So we need to do something else. So after capture, king runs. Well, then we have this knight sitting here. Looks like we can bring that over, deliver another check, and the king will have to run to c8. And that will allow us to deliver a mate on e8. So, depending what your goals are, you can practice calculation like that, but you'll also learn these patterns as well. So it's up to you and your level of chess play, what your rating is. If you're a beginner, do easier problems, but at all times, no matter what rating you are, you can start with easier problems and work your way up. and so do a mix possibly of easy and hard ones. Okay, there we go. The knight delivers the check, and then we deliver a mate. All right, on to the next puzzle. Okay, and as always, feel free to leave comments if you have any questions about pattern recognition or anything else. I always enjoy hearing comments, or reading comments from viewers and subscribers, and I try to answer all of them. Um, like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. All right, we have what, 4 more problems, and then I'll wrap this video up. So here the knight just jumped into this outpost, maybe threatening. There's no way to attack because of these bishops, or no way to get into the king here. By going there, the bishop's covering that. So let's look and see what we have here as far as checks, captures, and threats. All right. Checks. We could capture the rook, but the king would just capture us. The same with going here. So, what other checks do we have? What about, and hopefully you found this, pause the video if you need time to think. If not, what about the bishop delivering a check here? So we deliver a check. With a little bit of calculation, we find out that the only thing, remember, when a king is under attack, they can capture. That's not possible down here. Block or run. The king can't run because of the queen, but the rook can block, but we would just capture with our queen delivering a mate. So here we go. Check. Oh, and always remember when you're calculating to look at the whole board. And another reason to do these pattern recognition problems, it'll help you with your board vision, being able to see all the pieces on the board. Here I just, in a hurry, I overlooked this knight. But no matter, we just capture with check and still deliver our mate with the queen. All right, 3 more and we'll wrap the video up. Here we go. A queen has just captured on b2. Our rook is under attack, threatening a possible back rank mate against our king. So we need to act swiftly here. All right. Well, interesting problem here. It looks like there are some back rank mate possibilities on both sides. What should we do here with the white pieces? Okay. Now, I was asked what my chess rating was, and my rapid rating's probably around 1750 on chess.com. Which I'm trying to improve. My blitz and bullet are not as good because I read or came across that everybody's brain has a processing speed that you're kind of stuck with. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a doctor or a brain expert, so I don't know for sure, but I'd read that we all have a processing speed that you're kind of stuck with, and you can't really increase the speed at which your brain will process and calculate information. So, my brain is not as good with fast calculation in blitz games, so I don't do as good as as good in those. I do better in long, slow games. And as you get older, your brain is not as efficient, so you slow down. So that's probably why I have more difficulty with blitz and bullet, no matter how many games I play. But pattern recognition is kind of like a shortcut that can help with that. The more patterns you learn, so if you learn the patterns in the opening you're using, then you'll play better, make less mistakes. The better you get at tactics and recognizing tactical patterns, the better you'll play with tactics, and that can kind of help speed your game up. All right, what have you figured out here? If we look for checks first, what can we do? Maybe capture this. That could be a possibility, but then the other rook would recapture. And what has that gotten us? I don't really see much possible there. Okay. All right, yeah, so if we capture, they'll just recapture, and I don't see a good follow-up. What's another check? If we go here with the queen, the king can just capture us, and then I don't really see much follow-up there. So maybe if we don't have any good checks, are there any, and I don't see any good captures, capturing that rook. And when you're looking for captures, generally you want to look for any unprotected pieces. I mean, we have this queen that's unprotected. But we have to deal with this attack here. So maybe we move that to here, doubling up our rooks. We're threatening to take that rook. That could be a possibility. All right, I'm going to look at that. If we double our rooks up, and this is what I mentioned, as you do more difficult problems, you have to calculate a lot more. And so the calculation could get in the way of your pattern recognition, because if you're focused on calculation, you won't be able to do as large a volume of problems. So if you can do like 100 basic patterns of pins or tactics on forks or checkmates or whatever you want to work on, if they're easier problems, you can do a whole bunch of them in a shorter period of time. But of course, if they're too easy, you want to slowly, increase the difficulty. But no matter what, you'll probably have to work on calculation as well. So I'm thinking we go here with our rook, doubling up, threatening to capture. If the king tries to defend, well, then we could drop our queen down here and give a check, driving the king back, or if this rook blocks, then we can just take it. So, all right, am I missing anything simple here? Taking this rook doesn't do anything because we'll just be captured. So I'm going to double these rooks up. That looks to be pretty good. Okay, that's what they wanted. And now we can just go ahead and capture the rook, and we'll go ahead of rook. If we capture and they capture, then we recapture, and it'll be with check. So that'll save us from having to worry about the back rank. It gives us time to move a pawn or something to give us some back rank breathing room. All right, so capture and capture with check. So the king will be forced to move down here. We could even get our queen involved by dropping down here and delivering another check. All right, I'll do 2 more problems and wrap it up for today. Okay, the pawn is pushed forward. What now? We have black to move. And why don't we just go here and threaten a back rank mate? I think that will work. All right, but let's just double check. All right, we have our king. We want to move it up. The pawns are going what direction? Looks like this one's about ready to mate here. Or not mate, promote. So bring the king up, and then we threaten a back rank mate by going here. And I don't think they can harass us. So let's try that. There we go. And then we take their rook, with a mate there. Okay, one more problem. Bishop has done what here? Did it capture a pawn? I didn't see, but we have a check. Now, should we just capture? If we do that, the queen will come down and deliver a check. That could be an issue. All right. Now, before you move, count up the materials, see what's going on. We have 7 pawns versus what? 7. 4 minor pieces versus 4. So everything's equal as far as material, but we're about to snatch up a bishop. Can we do that? Can we accept this sacrifice and do it safely? If you don't see any problem with it, generally you want to accept the sacrifice. But remember, you don't have to sacrifice. If you try to sacrifice material, your opponent does not have to accept it. But it looks like if we take that, how does our opponent follow up? Well, the queen could go here or here and deliver a check. And here looks like a problem. If they go here, we can just drop our knight back. So take, let's say the queen goes here. That looks to be the most difficult problem to deal with. And this is, once again, as I mentioned, this is where the calculation is involved. So, we're kind of dealing more with the calculation than we are just trying to memorize the patterns. So take, queen checks. The problem is we don't want to push this pawn, or the queen can just take that because of this knight. So capture, queen check. And I guess we could just try to run our king down to here. And then what? So let's calculate one more time. Take. We're checked by their queen. Our king runs here. Let's see. Looks like we should accept that. All right, so that's what they wanted. That was just an example of whether or not you should accept a sacrifice, and we did, and we just go ahead in material, even though we lost the right to castle here. Maybe our opponent would continue with this attack, forking our rook and bishop, but we could just move our rook up, I guess, to save it. And then maybe they would attack our bishop, or they could go after this right here. Anyway, there you have it. So as a review, what is chess pattern recognition. Well, the idea behind chess pattern recognition is to do a series of puzzles, whether they're on the computer, on chess.com, on your phone, on an app or whatever, or a book with just puzzles in it. You have to pick what type of puzzles to do according to your rating. If you're a beginner, you want easier puzzles. And as you improve, you can slowly increase the difficulty level on those puzzles. But you pick a group of puzzles, whether it's 5 or 10 or 20, 50, 100 or more. Just go through them nice and slow, then go back to the beginning, go through them again faster, and you could pick a set of puzzles that slowly increase in difficulty. And you'll go through the first half of those puzzles more quickly because they're easier, and then it might take you longer to do the more difficult ones. But go through the puzzles once, nice and slow, go through them faster the next time, and then increasingly faster each time. And if you do that 7 times, you'll remember quite a bit, and by the 7th time through, you'll almost instantly, within 10 or 15 seconds probably, you'll be able to solve most of these puzzles. All right, well, if you do that, you'll remember more patterns in chess, whatever patterns you decide to study. If you have a difficult or a problem area that you want to work on, you could just solve puzzles in that one area. So you just go over them again and again until you burn those patterns into your long-term memory, and then you'll be more likely to remember them in your own games in the future. As far as the difficulty, if you're working on just getting the basics down, kind of like in sports, if you want to practice your swing in baseball or your striking in soccer or, your free throw in basketball or whatever it is, you just do the basic movements over and over, maybe just practice that same shot over and over. So like in chess, you can just pick a tactic that you want to work on and just do a whole bunch of puzzles with that tactic. Make them easier if you're trying to get those patterns down. And then, as you improve, you can do slowly harder problems that have more calculation involved. All right, I hope this was helpful. Once again, feel free to leave comments and let me know what you think, or if you have any questions. Like and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.